no worries. Okay, so it's 1 o'clock. I like to start early. I hate conference calls that always start 5 minutes late because no one can be on time. So my name is Andrew Jones. I'm part of IBM. I'm actually celebrating my 30th anniversary this month. So I've been with the company a long time. Yeah, pretty exciting. So thank you for joining us today. I've done a few of these around the U.S. over the past year and a half or so, and this is a good-sized crowd. Unfortunately, it didn't fill the room, but for the claustrophobic folks, you have more room. I've actually done this where I've had 2 people in the room, so you never know what's going to draw people's attention or anything. So hopefully the topic is interesting to you. I talked to several of y'all on the show floor a little bit. I know typically the crowd is more from the infrastructure side, so I'll focus on our infrastructure offerings as well. The topic is modernization journey with VMware and IBM Cloud. And so by modernization, we're talking about app modernization, taking your legacy applications or what now are becoming legacy applications that run on-prem, moving them to the cloud, either through a lift and shift model or through actually rewriting them in a cloud native manner, and in between as well. It's kind of the in between that we'll talk about from a IBM VMware perspective that I think will be interesting to you. So I don't have my clicker today, so I'm going to stand behind here. You don't have to worry about the disclaimers. I'm not going to disclose any secrets. To back up a little bit, so VMware and IBM have been partners for a long time. Ever since VMware really became an enterprise solution, we've been partnering with them and reselling their solutions for quite some time. In 2016, we actually partnered with VMware to work with them on what now is called the VMware Cloud Foundation reference architecture. And we were the first service provider to come out with a VCF-based solution. We then forked off of that a little bit to accommodate a more agile release schedule, and we have our VMware vCenter server, which is still based upon the same reference architecture, still goes through the rigorous testing with VMware, but gives us a little more opportunity to roll out releases and new capabilities to the customers. Long-standing customer of VMware, probably the largest service provider of VMware solutions, largest NSX customer and business partner for VMware. So we've been doing this for a long time, more recently, again, around that VCF, VCS offering that we have. When we started cloud, and we've been doing cloud before cloud was cloud, and with VMware as well, some of the challenges, what's driving customers to the cloud are numerous, and a lot of these are up here. Hopefully you can relate to some of those. Maybe you solved this problem already, but there are a lot of these challenges we see, and when we're talking to customers, this is what they're facing. They need more capacity. They don't have floor space. They don't have cooling in their data centers. They're running on old hardware. It's hard to get new hardware. Lead times to get new hardware to deploy new systems is long and difficult. So a lot of different challenges that customers are facing on-prem. But there's also roadblocks moving to the cloud. Security is the one that usually comes up number 1. 2 is a fear of losing jobs. 3 is the hidden fees associated with moving to a cloud environment. Vendor lock-in is a concern. If it hasn't been a concern, it should be a concern. It's one of the things that we'll talk about when we talk about with IBM, the differentiations that we have provided different from other cloud providers is the lack that we don't lock you into that environment. That's part of the plan. I'm sure you've heard that we're acquiring a company called Red Hat for a small amount of money. That should be closing soon. That will also kind of reiterate our focus on being open and not wanting to lock customers in. We recognize that customers are going to have a multi-cloud environment, and we want to participate in that. So the use cases that we have seen over the past, I went a little bit too far, spoiled the little spoiler at the end there. Over the past 3 to 4 years that we've been doing the VMware-based solutions, these are kind of the typical starting point use cases that we've seen customers go through. One is data center consolidation. I've been acquiring new companies. We need to consolidate those data centers. We're too spread out. We need to consolidate. Various different reasons they want to do that consolidation. The second one is capacity expansion. I've outgrown the capacity and the capabilities I have in my data centers or my colo provider or whatever the case may be. They want to be able to expand that. Third one, DR, backup, and high availability is another big area. And DR and backup, mainly because it's become very expensive for the customers. They're looking for a lower cost solution to their traditional DR solution where it's co-located or hosted somewhere else, or for their backup because they're using tapes and they're going to offsite, and it's become a very expensive solution. So we have a lot of customers that are looking to cloud for solutions for both DR and backup. Security and compliance kind of seems counter to what I said a while ago as far as one of the blockers, but we have a lot of customers that are actually gaining greater security by moving to the cloud and leveraging the capabilities that we have as IBM and our investment in our infrastructure, in our security, and building our solution from the ground up with security in mind. And then infrastructure modernization. This is around my antiquated hardware that's running in-house, my inability to acquire new hardware in a timely fashion, my need to try out new versions of OSs on hardware I can't support in-house. So we have a lot of customers kind of moving for that reason. And then the last one is kind of this new one that we're starting to see, and this is that app modernization. How do I take those legacy applications and start to modernize them into this great new technologies that we have that are rolling out? And when I talk about the great new technologies, containers is kind of the big foundation for that. How do I take those applications I have today and move them into a container base and be able to manage them that way? How do I leverage web-based services that are available like IBM Watson and all the analytics that you hear about, the other capabilities that are provided in the cloud environment? How do I start taking advantage of those with my legacy applications? So that's kind of where we've been focusing on. And this is actually, I'll talk about what we call IBM Cloud Private, which is a Kubernetes-based solution that we have today, and where kind of in the future there will be kind of the OpenShift focus with the Red Hat capabilities. Kind of those two will kind of merge together. So this why app modernization? So a couple of different reasons that people are doing this. One is to accelerate the digital transformation of their existing applications. So they are looking to gain agility for their applications that they have, be able to roll out new products, new capabilities in a much more agile fashion than they can do today with their kind of very siloed applications or monolithic applications that are running in-house. Improve developer productivity, increasing the operational efficiency, the whole DevOps capability, be able to do that and leverage the cloud to take advantage of those pieces to get speed to market, additional agility and flexibility. The bottom chart is one. This is actually an IBM chart that was developed. And I typically don't just show ours. I usually have, Forrester or Gartner or other things that are on here. But what was interesting about this one is, we believe it, and I've seen it, and I think you can kind of roll this back to other big shifts within technology over the past 30 years that I've been involved, that we're starting to see this move to the cloud for the applications. We're starting to see people write cloud native applications. We're kind of at this point right now. There's a few folks or a few applications, especially in the enterprise space, that they've migrated or they've rewritten, or new applications that they've made are developed in the cloud native fashion. So containers based, using Docker and other capabilities in the cloud and taking advantage of those new services that are available. Over time, we expect that to increase. But what's not going to happen is you're not going to see every single application be rewritten to a cloud native environment. And several different reasons for that. One is time and money. You don't probably have an infinite budget to rewrite every application that you have. You probably have applications that you developed in-house that whoever wrote it is no longer with the company, may not even be alive anymore. Legacy applications that you bought from a third-party partner that may not be in business anymore. You don't have access to those applications. These pieces that you don't want to touch, you don't know how to touch, and it's not safe to touch those. So we anticipate those to go on for a while. So what's the middle ground? How do we start to take some of those applications and put them into a cloud environment and start leveraging some of those capabilities by modernizing them, by actually touching the code, and actually doing it without touching the code? And this kind of leads into where we're at with the VMware solutions. And the first phase, or one possibility of doing that modernization, is just a pure lift and shift. And so we have a platform called VMware vCenter Server, again, based upon that VMware Cloud Foundation reference architecture, jointly developed with IBM and VMware, that allows you to fully deploy a VMware stack on a public cloud infrastructure, the IBM cloud, running on bare metal servers that are dedicated to you. So when we first started our cloud, we had our own version of the cloud. Then we acquired a company called SoftLayer. So some of you may have heard SoftLayer. What was really unique about their capability is that they have the ability to provision bare metal servers, make them available to customers just like a virtual server, like you see on Amazon today, but at a bare metal side. So we deployed this VMware stack starting with the ESXi server being deployed, vSphere, vCenter, NSX, optionally vSAN for storage, on bare metal servers completely dedicated to you in an IBM data center. The unique thing about our offering versus some of the other providers that have a VCF solution is that we give you full access to that stack. Not only is it dedicated bare metal servers, but you have the keys to the kingdom from the ESXi console all the way up. You can manage it in the vCenter environment just like you would on-prem. Full access to it, deploy any plugins to vCenter, deploy any processes and procedures you have for managing your VMware-based environments. You can do that in the IBM cloud. Some of the other server, providers that are doing VCF type solutions, you have the ability to provision a virtual machine or set of virtual machines and do some network capabilities. Here we give you that full administrative access and control of that environment, so you can run it and manage it just like you would on-prem. Data centers, and I'll show this in a minute when I do a demo of where we're available in over 30 data centers around the world. There are 60 IBM data centers, typically the number we throw out. The VMware solutions are in about half of those today. So what we've done, so here's kind of that stack again, kind of a high-level architecture, big animal picture here. We have the bare metal infrastructure, again, fully managed by IBM for the infrastructure. You manage everything above the stack. We have those infrastructure services for the vCenter server environment. It's client-managed, flexible VMware stack. Bring your own license capabilities, which we'll touch on in a few minutes as well. We have integrated with HCX. If you're not familiar with HCX from VMware, it allows you to create a layer 2 network between your on-prem environment and a cloud environment or another VMware environment, and easily migrate workloads between those two environments. So it provides a very nice migration path into a cloud environment with HCX. And then we have a set of additional services that are available. And this is really the ecosystem of partners that we have that are available to fully automated deployments onto that VMware stack. So push of a button to be able to deploy Cavionics or FortiGate or F5 capabilities in there. Both on the Fortinet side, both virtual and physical appliances that can be deployed into the environment, fully deployed. You start to manage it and up and running within a day. DR and backup, we partner with Zerto and Veeam and IBM Spectrum Protect. We have a NetApp solution that's built on top of this stack as well. And then now on the far right-hand side is containers with the IBM Cloud Private solution that we'll discuss in a minute as well, which we'll discuss right now. So ICP is IBM Cloud Private. IBM Cloud Private is available on this VMware stack in the IBM Cloud. It's available to deploy on-prem in your own VMware environment or OpenStack environment. It's available on Amazon and Azure as well. So IBM Cloud Private, or ICP, is a Kubernetes container orchestration platform. So ability to run any Docker container within that and all the orchestration that Kubernetes provides, running on top of that VMware stack, running in the IBM Cloud. There's core operational services around log management, monitoring, alerting, and security, as well as the enterprise content catalog. And the content catalog are containers that IBM has developed along with third parties, a very common IBM middleware like DB2, WebSphere, and others, as well as third party and open source capabilities like MongoDB, MariaDB, and other open source capabilities that are already containerized and fully available in that managed catalog that we have. Again, that catalog, you get a local copy of that catalog. You can bring updates in that IBM has blessed and tested and verified. Again, you can do this both on-prem and in the cloud environment. So it allows you that platform to now start doing your container development, and the nice thing is it's running on top of that VMware stack that you're also managing, and be able to scale up and scale out just like you would in any other cloud environment. So the Kubernetes, again, this kind of the architectural picture on the right-hand side. We have that VMware stack that's deployed on top of those bare metal servers. The ICP is deployed on a set of those VMs running within that environment. So very easily scale that out. You get the catalog of services to be able to create those new either cloud native based applications or migrate those applications into that more modern environment. It mentions NSXT here. We actually have an early version of NXT that's available as a pre-production environment, as we call it today. Later this year, as it stabilizes, we'll have an option to deploy NSXV or NSXT on top of our stacks. And we also have multi-cloud manager. I won't talk about that on this one here, but there's really the ability to, as you deploy applications, whether it's an IBM cloud, on-prem, in Amazon or in Azure to be able to manage those containers and those workloads from a single point or a single portal environment, regardless of where they're actually deployed. Machine's a little bit slow here. Okay, yep, that's why. Let me go back. So that modernization journey we talked about. So the first that I mentioned about this is that kind of that, 10%, 15%, depending on who you listen to, the applications that have moved to the cloud. A lot of those were cloud native development. That was rewriting an application or writing an application from scratch, leveraging containers, running it in the cloud environment, be it IBM Cloud, be it Microsoft, be it AWS, where you have that ability, whether you're using Kubernetes or not, but you're leveraging those new programming technologies and capabilities that the cloud provides, and the application becomes cloud aware. You also have all these on-prem environments. These are those, legacy, heritage, whatever term you want to use to call them, that are written often as monolithic applications that run within your environment. And what we're seeing people start to do is that lift and shift. Take them as is, especially if they're virtualized, running on VMware, deploy VMware vCenter Server on IBM Cloud. Using HCX, very easily migrate to and from, back and forth into the IBM Cloud environment and run those applications as is and manage it just as is as you are in your current environment. What this provides you is at least nearness to a lot of these other services. So if you do have a monolithic application that can be extended with web services, you can very easily leverage some of the IBM-based cloud services like Watson AI and Watson Image Analytics, which what the term is, or the product name. A lot of the business analytics that are out there, the statistical models that we have in our Watson portfolio, as well as other portfolios of services that we have on top of the IBM Cloud. So again, lift and shift, you haven't touched your code, you're managing it just like you were, but now you have the ability to scale up, rapidly scale out your environment and scale back when you don't need it. The next piece is really that cloud enable piece, and this is starting to transform those workloads by extending them into the public cloud. And we have some really unique capabilities here where with the ICP catalog and the containerized images that we have, one of those would be WebSphere Application Server. So if you're a WAS company that uses WAS for your application as your application server, we have a container that allows you to take your legacy WAR files or J2EE applications that are running in WAS today, repackage them and run them as is without touching the code in a container. So now you can leverage the containers and Kubernetes to manage that environment without having to modify that application. That's kind of another way that you can start that modernization journey without touching the actual code. The other way is what's called cloud enable, and this is where you're starting to re-platform those workloads with containers, where you're actually starting to break those monolithic applications up and identifying pieces that can be easily or fairly easily moved into web services and managed through a container in that environment. So now you're starting to actually touch the code, break it up, and we have tooling that will actually analyze those old WAR files or J2EE applications and look at and identify, here's parts of those codes that are ripe for movement, that can be fairly isolated, that can be moved into containers as a microservice and made available as a microservice and be managed that way. So we have tooling around that allows you to do that, starting to break up that application and allow you to start to, again, modernize that. That's a lot easier than rewriting that from scratch. And so you're kind of, again, stepwise getting to that cloud native perspective, but you're not having to change all of the code at one time. So what I want to do is just kind of switch over real quick before I go back into this slide and just show a brief demo of the VCS environment that we mentioned. Let me mirror my screen here. So this is our portal, and it allows you to go in there and provision a VCS environment. Again, the VCS is, again, that full IBM stack. You see the kind of a summary picture of it here as well. Running on bare metal servers, fully dedicated to you. vSAN is optional. NSX, vCenter Server, all running on those bare metal servers. So if I click on continue, you get a fairly easy to use portal interface. I'm just going to make up a name here. Give you the option to choose the level of vSphere that you want. I'm actually going to go back to 6.5 because it'll open up some additional hardware capabilities that we have. you choose the first instance that you deploy will be a primary instance. For the scalability side, what's really important to understand is that we have, no real restrictions outside of what VMware does as far as how large your environment can grow. And so we support enhanced link mode, so you can have a primary instance up to 7 additional secondary instances that are all linked together, be able to manage those through a single vCenter instance. For licensing, again, we have a subscription-based licensing of the VMware components, or if you already have an ELA with VMware, want to bring those licenses into the environment, you can easily do that. You can provide those licenses for you. NSX, again, choice and licensing, base, advanced, or enterprise. And then data center location. Again, those 30 data centers I mentioned before that are geographically dispersed around the world. And on the west side of North America, it's in San Jose. 2 physically separate data centers within the San Jose region. South is in Dallas and in Mexico. East, on the East Coast, we have Washington, D.C., 3 data centers, Washington, D.C., Montreal, and Toronto in Canada. South America is just Sao Paulo at this time. In Europe, there's about, I think, 8 to 10 data centers in Europe spread out throughout Europe. London has multiple now because of the whole threat exit and everything else that's going on there. AP in China, as well as multiple in Australia, Japan, India, and Tokyo as well. So data centers located around the world for you to deploy that environment in. It's important to mention here also, if you deploy in multiple IBM data centers, let's say you're going to do a DR solution, you have your production environment running in Washington, D.C., and you have failover in let's say, Dallas. The nice thing about it, any replication of data that goes across from one IBM data center to the other IBM data center, you don't pay for any of that network traffic. And that's very different than other service providers. And it's one of the areas, when we talk about hidden costs within the cloud, that's one of those typically hidden costs that you don't realize until you get that bill and realize that you're actually transferring data between 2 different data centers and you're getting charged for that egress. We don't do that within IBM. You're leveraging the backbone that we have, that we've built out, and with plenty of capacity to be able to transfer that data so that is free of charge. Choice in the infrastructure that you actually deploy. We actually support both Skylake and Broadwell processors. We have SAP certified hardware as well. All the hardware choices that you have here to deploy these environments are on the VMware hardware compatibility list. We do all that work for you from the the BIOS and the drive, every driver in there, the disks and the processor. All that has been checked out and validated and is blessed by VMware. Skylake, newer processor, 16 cores, 28 or 36 cores. If I skip over the Broadwell, you have some of the bigger core counts with 40 and 64 cores. And SAP certifies some very large systems with up to 96 cores in that environment as well. So you have that flexibility to choose the hardware. Other VCF type of deployments, they have one single hardware and you don't really get to choose. You don't have that selection capability. So if I go back over to the Skylake, I'll select one of these. Flexibility in choosing the amount of RAM. Again, this is on a per server basis. You can start with a deployment as small as 2 servers. We don't recommend that. We recommend a minimum of 3 for any type of production level work for availability reasons. If you're using vSAN, then we force you to 4 for vSAN availability. Storage can be either vSAN, as I mentioned before, or storage, NFS, or cloud-based storage, as we like to call it. We can also do some local disk capabilities that without vSAN. vSAN is nice, great storage technology there. The problem is the vSAN, you have to use the local disks that are within the chassis that are deployed. The problem is if you have a requirement for a lot of storage, but not a lot of compute, you're kind of caught. And so the cloud-based storage provides you the flexibility to scale the storage independent of your compute capacity. So you can define the number of shares that you want, the performance that you want on each one of those shares. You can define multiple shares. You can do this both at the initial provisioning or after the fact as well. Give it a host name, a little bit of networking information on there. We have a couple of options for the DNS side. And then we have those optional services I mentioned before. So business continuity, IBM Spectrum Protect for backup and DR, Veeam, again, for backup and DR, Zerto, all competitors, but also good partners of IBM. Those are all available. Cavionics for risk insight, F5, FortiGate, high trust, data center control and cloud control and key control, and then the IBM Cloud Private Hosted. Again, All these additional services can be selected here, or they can be deployed after you deploy your initial instance as well. Fully deployed software is deployed. In some cases, some base configurations are done. In other cases, for instance, for the FortiGate, we completely lock it down. We allow you to open it up and control how the flows work with the FortiGate. So you'd hit provision at that point, and then if I go back over and we'll do the magic cooking show here, and I'll go to an instance that's already been provisioned, go to my resources, you'll see I have a couple of that have been deployed. This is one in Washington, D.C. And again, just to reiterate the piece about you really control this environment. This is running on bare metal servers that you fully control. You'll notice that there are passwords down in here for the administrator, for vCenter, as well as for NSX. You control it. You manage it the way that you want to manage it. If you want to access the vCenter console, I have a VPN that's already established to my environment. It's going to bring up the vSphere. At this point, you'll see the blue screens come up. I authenticated a while ago, so it didn't prompt me for it. After this comes up, after a couple seconds, I think we're all used to seeing this screen a few times. It's vCenter. There's nothing different in there. We're not modifying vCenter. We're not doing anything. What we do is we maintain a tie where we can actually go in there and provision additional hardware and additional clusters in that environment, but you run and manage vCenter just like you would on-prem. It looks like I need to change some passwords. So if I go back to the IBM Cloud Portal, click on the infrastructure, click on, if I want to, we have that first cluster that we provisioned. In this case, I provisioned it with 3 servers. If I want to add a server, I can add a server. I can grow up the initial cluster can go up to, I believe, 51 servers in the cluster. Any additional cluster that we add can go up to, I believe it's 57. And that's just based upon IP ranges, addresses in the subnets. One thing that we do maintain as a best practice, both from IBM and from VMware, is that a cluster is homogeneous in hardware configurations. So you'll notice here that I don't get to select the hardware I want, but if I go in here and I want to create a new cluster, then it'll look very similar to what we saw a while ago when I provisioned the initial cluster. Not only do I get to give it a cluster name and set the hardware, but also going to say that this cluster, instead of being in Dallas, can actually be in Washington, D.C. Still managed through vCenter the same way, cluster deployed in Dallas, cluster deployed in Washington, D.C., or China, or wherever you want to deploy that cluster. The one thing worth mentioning, if a lot of people always worry about the data movement and movement of my data outside of the U.S. or anywhere else, we don't do any of that. So if you deploy in Dallas and one in India, any data movement, that's under your control. We're not going to automatically migrate workloads or move data or do anything else. Again, you're in full control of that environment. So I can add a new cluster. I can set a different configuration for that cluster as I say fit. Update and patching of key services. The services are those optional services. So in this case, I have IBM Cloud Private. Veeam is deployed. I'm going to go to the IBM Cloud Private console. And the reason I want to show this, kind of flip back to the that app modernization story, is this catalog of services that come with IBM Cloud Private. Again, this is ICP, this is Kubernetes that's deployed on top of that VMware stack that you're managing. Here's the catalog of services that are available. So these catalogs are ones that IBM has created, manage, and deploy into your now private catalog of services that you can deploy and manage how you see fit. Access control and everything else. If you want to remove things from your copy of the catalog, you can do that. If you don't want your development team to access that, you can control who has access to the catalog, who can provision new containers, and how that is all managed. So in this case, if I go back to that WebSphere story that I mentioned earlier, type in WebSphere, you'll see not only WebSphere Liberty, which is kind of the newer version of the WebSphere, but also WebSphere Traditional. This would allow me to take my current existing J2EE application, import that WAR file or AIR file into this environment and run it as is without modifying that code. Fully deployed WebSphere as a container. That Kubernetes engine that ICP has will manage that environment. It will handle the scaling, the scale up and the scale back of the environment. If you want 4 instances running all the time, you set it to 4. Kubernetes manages that. If one goes down, it automatically spins up the other one. So full orchestration management that Kubernetes provides for that container now. So I mentioned the partners that we have. Deployment history, kind of worth showing this. Is people ask me, how long does it take to provision this type of environment? So if I go back to the history of this instance that was deployed, I started on March 14th at 11:37 in the morning. If I go back to the last page or the most recent page, when it was fully deployed, there's some updates that have been done, some licensing changes. So March 15th at 11:56 or 10:26 was the instance was ready to be ready and turned over to the customer. Turned over to me. So within 24 hours, I had 3 nodes fully deployed, bare metal service that I control. I had vCenter deployed running on ESXi hosts that are fully automated deployment of that, NSX. I don't believe I had vSAN in this configuration. I had cloud-based storage. All that fully automated, deployed, ready, and turned over to the customer for second-day operations. Not many people can do that in-house, even if they have the server hardware available to them. And if you have to acquire the servers and the hardware and the licensing and everything else, you're looking typically at weeks, or if not months, to do that. So on the scalability, again, I mentioned you can add new clusters, you can grow those clusters, you can actually shrink those as well. So we do require that when a cluster is initially created, however many servers you start it with, that's as small as it can get, but you can grow it and then you can shrink it back down to that size. So if you're in the retail business, have peak performance requirements during November, December, January, you can scale up and then scale back down. Pricing is subscription-based pricing for the hardware. It's done on a monthly basis. So you pay for that server for the month that you use it. If you deprovision it, you no longer pay for it. So you don't have to, have this extra hardware sitting there that's underutilized or overutilized for certain periods of time. Provision what you need, deprovision when you don't need it. So where am I on time? Doing good. Okay. So let me just flip back real quick to the PowerPoint charts and leave you with a couple of things. My business card's here, and some of these links are on here as well. If you don't want to jot down the links, feel free to grab a business card on the back or the links. The first one is our external marketing page about the VMware solutions. I encourage you to go out there and learn all about the offerings there. The second link is what we call is from our digital technical engagement team, which is what I'm part of. And there's a lot of hands-on demos that are available to you, not only on the VMware solutions that we've mentioned, but on a lot of the other IBM products as well. So it's a great learning tool. It's worth, what I'll do is kind of flip over to that page real quick. So if you want to learn more about the IBM Cloud offerings, you can go out to this page. There's the IBM Cloud for VMware Solutions. There's a click-through demo on there where you can kind of walk through exactly what I did on that provisioning piece of it. There's one that we just recently did with Veeam on IBM Cloud and object storage. So a very low-cost solution for long-term backup capabilities. So those of you that are struggling with your tape backups and management of that and the costs associated with off-site storage, a lot of customers moving to the cloud with a cloud-based solution with Veeam and object storage for low-cost solutions there. Data science and business analytics, a lot of the Watson offerings that we have are all out here. There's typically at least 1 or 2 videos associated with either a click-through demo or a hands-on lab where you can experience these products. So if you ever wanted to learn a little bit more about AI or BI or MongoDB or whatever else is in there, there's a robotics one in here. A lot of different capabilities about the IBM offerings. I encourage you to take a look at that page and try out those demos. And if you have any questions, feel free to respond online there, and you can always ask for help as well for those. Kubernetes, there's the ability to try Kubernetes. If you're not familiar with Kubernetes, look for some announcements coming out around the Red Hat acquisition and kind of how ICP morphs into the OpenShift solution based upon OpenShift. And I think that's my last chart. The VMUG chart. They do encourage you to respond with your critique of the session. If you didn't register on the little kiosk outside, I encourage you to do that, especially if you're doing the point game that's going on to win the prizes. Scan your badge out there. My colleague, if you haven't been to our booth over there, Tom is back in the back. If he can scan you, that'd be great as well. So now, any questions or comments or thoughts, or usually 1 or 2 questions? Gotta have 1. All right, half a question. What time is lunch? What time is happy? Beer's at 4 o'clock. I'll buy in the expo. No questions. Not even an AIX or an AS400 question that I can't answer. I always get those. There's usually 1. All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time and have a great day.